Level 1 to 100. Mind-bending consciousness tests. To fall asleep. 2. What if your thoughts weren't yours? What if each idea that crossed your mind tonight was part of a test you never signed up for? Somewhere between the tick of a clock and the pull of a dream, your consciousness is being stretched, gently but undeniably. Are you merely thinking or being thought? Tonight, we won't give you answers. We'll offer doorways, one by one, from level 1 to 100. Each level is a question dressed as a lullaby, a riddle wearing the silence of sleep, a quiet tug on the edge of what you believe to be real. So lie back, let go, and allow these gentle paradoxes to cradle you into stillness. You're not here to pass or fail, only to float through the mysteries of your own mind. The door to the impossible. You've just arrived, not at a place, but a pause, a space between breaths, between moments, where something unspoken waits. You may not feel different yet, but already something inside you has begun to loosen, like a coat you've worn too long, slipping from your shoulders as the room warms. Let's begin not with a leap, but with a tilt, a gentle one, just enough to shift the angle of what you think you know. What if the world you live in isn't the only one? Someone once said that we never really see things as they are. We see them as we are. So what happens when the lens itself bends? When the ground beneath your certainty begins to ripple, not in fear, but in curiosity? You've been taught, of course, that time moves forward, that things fall down, not up, that if you want something, you must do something. These are the bricks of your everyday house. But tonight, let's notice the cracks in the walls. Some doors don't open with handles. They melt with questions. They hum when you stop insisting. They open not out into something else, but in toward something deeper, a place you may have touched before in dreams, in déjà vu, in moments where logic stood still and wonder took the wheel. "Excuse me," someone says softly at a cafe counter. "I think you dropped this." It's a paper you don't remember holding. On it, a sentence you once thought but never wrote. What if everything is just one thought away from changing shape? You smile without knowing why. You don't need a reason. You just feel open. Because this isn't about getting answers. That's too small a box. No, this is about loosening the box itself, about wondering who built it, and whether they were dreaming when they did. You may ask, but how can I ever see beyond my own mind if even my questions are shaped by it? That is a wise question, and wisdom tonight is not a destination, it's a direction. Two friends sit beneath an overpass at dusk. One says, "Do you ever feel like your thoughts aren't yours? Like you're thinking someone else's dream?" The other laughs gently. "All the time. But maybe that's where the fun starts. And maybe it is. You see, the real beginning of thought isn't when we chase ideas, but when we let them come to us sideways, unexpectedly, like moonlight creeping under a locked door. So if you're drifting already, that's okay. You can always return. Or maybe, just maybe, you never left. Let the question float. What if this is not the edge of what's possible, but the entrance? Now take a quiet breath. Let your curiosity be the key. Welcome to Level 2. The paradox of free will. You say you'll wake up early tomorrow. Hit the gym. Text that person back. Say no this time. You believe you're the one steering the ship. But somewhere, beneath that quiet voice in your head, another question whispers, "Are you really choosing any of it?" It's a strange kind of magic, the feeling of agency. You think of lifting your hand, and it rises. You decide to speak, and words fall out like petals. But if you watch closely, really closely, science offers a deeper cut. In the milliseconds before you consciously choose, your brain has already made the decision. Neurons fire, signals move, the body prepares. Then, only after the machinery is already in motion, your awareness catches up and says, "I chose this," as if watching a parade from the rooftop and claiming you're leading it. Spinoza once wrote that we are not free beings. We are merely aware of our desires, not of their causes. And that haunting idea that we are not authors, only readers of our own lives, starts to feel uncomfortably plausible. Because if you didn't truly choose your thoughts, if your choices are shaped by biology, childhood, mood, the weather, the moment, then what is you made of? A pattern? A wave of consequences mistaken for command? Two friends sit beneath a slow-turning fan in a late-night diner. One stirs his coffee. You ever feel like you were going to say something before you even thought it? The other nods, smirks. All the time. Like I'm just watching the show unfold, pretending I'm directing it. They laugh, but the silence that follows isn't empty. It's thick with recognition, a shared unease. The fragile belief that choice is ours flickers for a moment. And if free will is an illusion, then what happens to guilt? If someone wrongs you, but they never chose to be that person, to make that mistake, do you forgive them faster or feel even more lost? What happens to love if the gesture wasn't freely made, but merely happened, like a breeze brushing your cheek? Is meaning itself tied to the illusion of choice, or is it something deeper, found not in decision, but in experience? Maybe, just maybe, the value of a moment doesn't come from choosing it, but from feeling it fully. A hug, a look, a soft apology. Maybe it matters not because it was chosen, but because it was real. And so, we loosen our grip a little. We let the wheel turn without clenching it so tightly. We breathe. We let the current carry us, not because we've given up, but because maybe there's something beautiful in drifting too. Close your eyes now. The next level awaits, not with answers, but with softer questions. The simulation hypothesis. There's something strange about the quiet hum of late night, the stillness between seconds, where even the shadows seem unsure if they belong. It's in these moments that questions like this drift in. What if everything around you isn't real? Not in the theatrical sense. No blinking red code raining down from the sky. No glitch in the clouds. Just a quiet suggestion, whispered through history, echoed now by philosophers and scientists alike. Nick Bostrom, Elon Musk. They didn't invent the idea, but they dared to make it logical. They ask, if intelligent beings in the future could simulate entire universes, and they could simulate millions, what are the odds we happen to be the original? The math doesn't favor the base reality. So you're saying, we're just code? A man asked, half smiling as he held the elevator door open for someone. The other replied, maybe. But this code still gets butterflies when it sees her name light up on the screen. That's the paradox. Even if your entire world is built from algorithms and light, does that make your laughter less sincere? When your heart races at the sight of someone across the room, does it matter whether it's physics or programming? Think of pain, not the idea, but the feeling. The sharp jolt when your hand brushes a hot mug, or the slow, dull ache of a memory that doesn't fade. If those responses are just subroutines in a cosmic hard drive, does that make them any less valid? Or are they just different kinds of truth? One woman, leaning on a park bench, once said to a stranger, If my love for him was simulated, it still broke me in ways that felt eternal. And the man simply nodded. Maybe reality isn't what's built. Maybe it's what's felt. We live through patterns, eyes blinking, hearts beating, apps refreshing. But consciousness? That's something else. If our minds are housed in something artificial, then perhaps meaning isn't defined by what built us, but what we choose to notice. A sunset, a goodbye, a whispered thank you that changes someone's day. You might be wondering, does it change anything, knowing this? Or does it just deepen the mystery? Maybe that's the point. Because even if you're a line of elegant code, even if this world is stitched together by silent servers in another dimension, you still feel the wind. You still smile when someone remembers your birthday. You still miss people when they leave. So let's not rush the answer. Let's simply notice that even simulated stars can twinkle. Even a pixelated breeze can brush against your skin and feel like memory. And now, as your breathing slows and your thoughts drift like scattered sand, let's move deeper, not to escape, but to dissolve softly into the next layer of wonder. The Infinite Hotel, Hilbert's Paradox. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this: a grand hotel, its hallway stretching endlessly, each door numbered 1, 2, 3, reaching toward a horizon you can never touch. Now imagine that every single room is already occupied, not one is empty. And yet, someone new walks in, asking for a room. The manager, without flinching, nods and says, "Of course, we can make space." This is Hilbert's Hotel, a thought experiment proposed by the German mathematician David Hilbert, a place where the strange nature of infinity begins to shimmer at the edges of reality. It's not just a hotel, it's a mirror held up to the infinite, reflecting something so vast that our minds try to tame it with logic and fail. The trick? The manager simply asks every guest to move from room 1 to room 2, room 2 to room 3, and so on. Suddenly, room 1 is empty. One small shift in the infinite, and space appears from what was already full. Sitting by the window, two travelers stare into the night sky after hearing the story. "Wait," says one. "How can it be full and still have space?" The other replies softly, "Maybe it was never really full in the way we think of it. Maybe infinity doesn't obey our kind of full." They sip their tea, their minds echoing with quiet awe. This paradox doesn't just challenge math, it whispers to something deeper. If infinity allows for contradictions, then what does that mean for the universe? Can time stretch the same way? Can a soul feel complete and still have room to grow? The Infinite Hotel becomes more than a number trick. It becomes a question dressed as a story. Maybe space isn't truly occupied. Maybe your mind, like the hotel, can always make room for another idea, another feeling, another dream. Infinity isn't just about quantity, it's about possibility. A hallway where no door is ever the last, no arrival ever marks the end. So tonight, as the lights dim and your breath slows, let this hotel drift into your imagination. Let its endless corridor unfold within you, not to confuse, but to free. The universe might not be made of rooms and doors, but perhaps it is made of space that never truly runs out. And now, as we walk further down the corridor of thought, let infinity settle quietly into your mind, like a guest that was always already there. Schrödinger's cat. Somewhere between two thoughts and the soft rise of your breath, a door creaks open. The hallway is neither bright nor dark. It simply waits. There's a box resting gently on the floor, sealed but not locked. And you're told, inside, there's a cat. It might be alive, It might be dead. It might be both, or somehow neither. No, this isn't a riddle designed to frustrate. It's Schrödinger's cat, a puzzle wrapped in paradox, a gentle rebellion against the logic we cling to. In 1935, Erwin Schrödinger, a physicist with a mind full of curiosity and doubt, offered this scenario to poke at the absurdities of quantum theory. A cat placed in a box with a mechanism triggered by the decay of a single atom. The atom may decay, or not. The mechanism may release poison, or not. Until we open the box, until we observe, the cat, in the language of quantum physics, exists in superposition, simultaneously alive and dead. A silence grows. It's not the silence of nothingness, but of possibility, a stillness humming with every outcome. So if no one's watching, a voice murmurs from the corner of the room, "What's really happening?" "Maybe everything," someone answers, resting their coffee gently on the windowsill. "Maybe nothing at all. Maybe awareness is the box being opened." And just like that, a strange thought begins to form. What if attention isn't passive? What if the very act of noticing changes the world? You're not just a spectator then. You're the observer that collapses the quantum haze into solid form. You're the reason the cat lives, or doesn't. In the deep, hidden theater of atoms and waves, your awareness carves reality into certainty. Does that make you powerful? Or just entangled? Maybe the answers don't come from asking. Maybe they arrive in the quiet moment between asking and letting go, like the way dreams appear just before sleep. A quiet reflection. When no one sees you, are you still yourself? Or do you shimmer in uncertainty, waiting to be chosen by someone's gaze? Outside, a wind brushes past. A curtain stirs. The box remains closed, but the question lingers. You don't need to solve it tonight. Just hold it softly. Let the breath deepen. Let the thought drift. In this pause, in this not quite knowing, something new is about to arise. Let's turn our attention away for just a moment and see what forms in the next unfolding. Zeno's paradox, the arrow that never moves. In the silence of the night, let your thoughts drift to a single moment, a still arrow suspended midair, not flying, not falling, just there, as if time had forgotten to tick forward. Zeno's paradox asks a question that tugs quietly at the fabric of everything we know. If time is made of endless fragments, how can anything ever move? Before an arrow can strike its target, it must reach the halfway point. But before that, it must reach halfway to halfway, and again, and again. An infinite ladder of distance, sliced thinner with each step. If there are infinite steps between 2 points, how do we ever arrive? How does motion begin? "It's strange," a man once whispered to his partner as they lay side by side in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan slowly rotating above. If time is just a series of frozen snapshots, then what's keeping us from being stuck in one? His partner chuckled softly. Maybe we are. Maybe we're not moving at all. Maybe everything is just still pictures being flipped so fast we can't tell the difference. Like a movie, he said. But who's running the projector? Maybe that's the heart of it. Maybe reality isn't a flowing river, but a reel of static frames, each one paused in perfect stillness, lit for only a blink, then replaced by the next. Our minds don't notice the gaps, the flickers, the silent stutters between frames. We smooth them into a seamless stream. We call it time. But if each moment is discrete, if we are never really moving, but merely appearing in different places across frames, then what is motion but a memory of difference? A trick we play on ourselves to make life feel continuous? And what then is change? Do we choose it, or are we just watching it happen, frame by frame, helplessly? A soft breeze rattles the window, and suddenly, we feel it. Maybe the arrow never moves. Maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe we only ever see it in one position at a time, and everything else, trajectory, purpose, intention, is just our desperate attempt to connect the dots. Let that idea settle as you drift deeper into rest. Perhaps the movement you feel in your life isn't from motion, but from awareness. Perhaps you are not flying through time, but watching time flutter past like a film strip, whispering its illusion of movement through the dark theater of your mind. The mirror universe. A room without sound, a cup still warm, and just beyond the edge of your awareness, something is watching, not with judgment, not with fear, but with a peculiar curiosity, like a mirror that's almost alive. Tonight, we drift into one of the strangest places the mind can wander, the mirror universe. Not a metaphor, a scientific possibility. In theoretical physics, some researchers have proposed that there could be another universe, perfectly balanced, where time runs in reverse and particles are reflected, an exact inversion of everything we know. Your heartbeat, ticking backwards, your footsteps, unwalking paths you haven't yet taken. It's not fantasy, it's math. But pause. Let's bring that thought closer to home. You're sitting in a cafe. The spoon clinks against your glass. Across from you, someone lifts their cup at the same time. But there's no one there, just the window, and the ghost of your movement trailing milliseconds behind. If this universe has a twin, what is that twin seeing when it looks at you? Two people talk quietly on a park bench. Do you think they're like us? One asks. The other shrugs. I wonder if they're more honest than we are, if their truths come before their words. In this reflection world, maybe every choice we make ripples backward. Maybe your regret becomes their relief. Your silence becomes their confession. Maybe your loneliness here is their closeness, just reversed. It brings up a strange kind of empathy, doesn't it? Knowing there could be another version of you, moving in mirrored rhythm, unknowingly intertwined. It doesn't need to be proven to be felt. That feeling when you turn your head quickly and for a split second think someone else moved with you. Or when a déjà vu moment flickers, not like a repeat, but like a reply. And in this whisper of possibility, a gentle question rises. If your mirror self was watching you right now, would they be proud, confused? Would they wonder why you paused so long before saying what you really meant? Or maybe they're wondering the same thing about you. Sometimes we don't need to look outward to find perspective. We just need to tilt our gaze. A glassy surface, a midnight window, a still pond where your face looks back with eyes that almost, but not quite, match your own. The mirror doesn't judge, it reflects, but it also invites, not to copy, but to notice. And now, let that mirror dissolve. The reflection fades, the questions remain, and the night gently carries us further, deeper, into the next layer of thought. The observer effect. In the hush of a dim room, with the world retreating behind closed lids, imagine this. Reality, as it hums in silence, isn't fixed. Not until you look. Not until something, someone, you, observes. Quantum physicists once thought they could measure the world without touching it. But what they found instead was far more poetic. To observe is to alter. The very act of witnessing shifts the outcome. The particle becomes a wave, then becomes a particle again. Possibility dances until the gaze steadies, and in that gaze, the world makes its decision. that means nothing's real until we see it? Not unreal, just waiting to become. This isn't just about science. It's about consciousness, about the part of you that watches, notices, pays attention. When a photon decides whether to pass through one slit or two depending on whether it's being watched, what does that say about you watching yourself? Are you collapsing your own potential simply by becoming aware of it? Let's drift further. If observation is participation, then every glance is a kind of authorship. You aren't just walking through a pre-written world. You're shaping it, choosing the moment it becomes solid. If this is true, then watching a flower bloom changes the way it blooms. For you, maybe even for the flower, a thought both absurd and beautiful. But here's where it ripples deeper. What does this mean for morality? For kindness? If witnessing changes reality, does your judgment shape what someone becomes? A child watched with love grows differently than one watched with suspicion. A friend seen with forgiveness walks a path unlike one who is always doubted. Could it be that the first act of love is simply to look without condemning? Sometimes I wonder if seeing people clearly makes them better, or maybe seeing them kindly lets them become who they truly are. And in that quiet reflection, maybe we find something even more delicate, that our gaze, when softened, heals, that our perception is not neutral, but sacred, each of us carrying this quiet power to shape not just matter, but meaning. So tonight, as you let your thoughts slow and your breath deepen, remember this: reality doesn't unfold despite you, it unfolds through you. You are the frame around the picture, the still hand that steadies the lens. Close your eyes now. The world will wait for you. Or maybe it will become something new, just because you dared to look. The twin paradox, time dilation. Two twins stand at the edge of a quiet launch pad. One remains on Earth, grounded in the rhythm of sunrise and sleep. The other boards a spacecraft, destined to skim the edge of light itself. Their goodbye is tender, but unremarkable, just two siblings sharing a moment. And yet, what waits at the end of this journey will fracture their bond in a way no one can see coming. When they meet again, they will no longer be the same age. One will have watched years unfold. The other will have barely aged at all. This is not science fiction. It is the strange truth of Einstein's theory of relativity. Time, according to relativity, is not a uniform current flowing through the universe like a ticking metronome. Instead, it stretches and folds depending on how fast you're moving. At speeds close to that of light, time itself slows down. A twin flying at such velocity lives fewer moments than the one who stayed home. Their hearts once beat in sync, but not anymore. Wait, one might ask, in a soft kitchen conversation late at night. Are you saying my clock isn't telling the same time as yours? It's not just the clock, the other answers. It's you. You'd be younger. And that's when it hits. The discomfort, the beauty, the unraveling of what we thought time was. If two people, born in the same second, raised in the same home, can diverge in age simply by moving through space differently, then time is not a fact. It's a feeling, a function of where you are, how fast you're going, and what forces are bending the reality around you. So how do we measure a life if the clocks themselves cannot agree? Is aging now a matter of geography and trajectory? And more hauntingly, if time can stretch and fold, does it ever truly pass at all? Or does it simply wait for some, skip others, and dance differently with each of us? In the stillness of space, the traveling twin watches stars blur into streaks, while on Earth, decades bloom and wither. The reunion is quiet. One twin carries 1,000 sunrises in their wrinkles. The other still wears the years like yesterday. Your heartbeat slows now. Your thoughts stretch like starlight across vacuum. And in that space between seconds, you wonder, if time is not fixed, then maybe we aren't either. The dream argument. It begins quietly, like a hush just before dawn, the kind of silence that almost makes you wonder if the world itself is holding its breath. And in that stillness, a thought seeps in, soft but persistent. What if this isn't waking? What if all of this is a dream you haven't yet left? René Descartes once asked this in a voice not much louder than yours, curled in the dark. He wasn't trying to frighten anyone, just curious. He noticed how dreams mimic life so convincingly that only in waking do we name them illusions. But what if no one ever wakes up? What if the illusion is so consistent, so saturated with cause and effect, that it becomes indistinguishable from the thing we call truth? Have you ever had that moment, one voice murmurs, when you wake up and feel a second of sadness, not because the dream ended, but because it felt more right than this? Yeah, the other replies, like I lost something real, but I couldn't name it. You've probably had mornings like that, days when the texture of your bedsheet felt more trustworthy than the numbers in your bank account, or when a stranger's face in a crowd seemed familiar, not from life, but from somewhere fuzzier. And maybe that's the real test. Not whether we can prove we're awake, but whether the waking world gives us more peace than the one we drifted from. The philosopher wasn't trying to destroy reality. He was trying to check if it held. If anything at all, remained firm when you pressed gently against the walls. He found only one answer. I think, therefore I am. A thought surviving the storm of doubt. But even that, perhaps, is a candle flickering in someone else's sleep. A woman asks the barista if she'd already paid for her drink. She's not sure. There's a pause. I think you did, the barista replies. But maybe I just dreamed you did. They both laugh, but something quiet lingers in the space between the espresso machine's hum and the moment's collapse. Maybe the reason dreams feel so real is because reality has never demanded to be anything more than consistent. Not honest, not solid, just recurring. The same faces, the same habits, the same stories told with different music. And what if being awake is not the absence of dreams, but the habit of believing them? You don't have to answer now. This question, like steam from a midnight cup of tea, curls up and disappears before you grasp it. You're not being asked to doubt everything, only to loosen your grip, just enough to feel the edges blur. Because sometimes clarity doesn't come from clinging harder, but from softening your gaze. A sigh, a blanket, the flicker of a thought. If this is a dream, let it be a kind one. And as the rhythm of your breath joins the quiet symphony of questions, another thought rises through the mist. One you didn't call, but recognize all the same. Let's follow it. The Fermi Paradox, a whisper in the dark. You lie still, eyes closed, drifting in that velvet space between consciousness and dream. And in that silence, a question echoes louder than sound. Where is everyone? The universe stretches beyond comprehension. Billions of stars, trillions of planets, countless chances for life. Statistically, we should not be alone. Mathematically, the odds of intelligent civilizations beyond Earth are overwhelming. And yet, as we point our telescopes to the sky, tune our radios to the stars, and wait in quiet anticipation, all we hear is emptiness. This dissonance between probability and experience is known as the Fermi paradox. It hums in the background of every scientific exploration, every deep space mission, every hopeful whisper of contact. One evening, under a sky glittering with ancient starlight, two friends sat on a park bench. "Do you ever wonder if there's someone out there watching us?" one asked softly. The other glanced up, a slow exhale fogging the cool night air. "I used to. But now I wonder if we're the ones being waited on. Maybe they're just observing. Maybe the silence isn't a void. Maybe it's a mirror held up to our species, asking us to look inward before we look outward. Could it be that intelligent life is out there, but chooses to stay quiet, watching a young civilization still learning not to destroy itself? Or perhaps they are so different that our attempts at communication are as meaningful as raindrops trying to speak to a mountain. What if advanced civilizations long surpassed the need for the physical, ascending into realms of existence that don't operate within our limited frequency? Or worse, what if intelligence inevitably leads to self-annihilation, and we are witnessing the quiet aftermath of civilizations that reached too far, too fast? Some wonder if we are in a zoo, a cosmic enclosure observed but untouched. Others fear we are shouting into a forest of predators, and the silence is their way of staying alive. In either case, the stillness becomes its own kind of answer, a response that forces reflection. And so, as your body sinks deeper into stillness, your mind expands beyond walls and stars. Let the silence wrap around you like a warm blanket, not as absence, but as invitation, an invitation to grow, to listen, to become. Maybe we are not alone. Maybe we were never meant to be. But until the veil lifts, the quiet will guide us to the next layer of mystery. Take a slow breath now. Let go of the need for answers, because sometimes the most honest response the universe gives is a whisper. And sometimes that whisper says more than any voice ever could. The trolley problem. The night hums softly now. Your breath is even. Your body floats somewhere between thought and surrender. But beneath this calm, a silent track splits into two, metal rails gleaming under the dim light of thought. And on it, a question rides forward. Not loud, not aggressive. Just there, like a whisper waiting at a crossroad. Would you pull the lever? 5 strangers, 1 life, a single choice. The kind of decision that doesn't come with sirens or applause, just the soft echo of consequence. And even in dreams, the weight of that lever presses into your palm. A young voice stirs in the dark. Is it wrong to choose? Another replies, older, steady. Only if you believe there's a perfect way not to. The trolley problem isn't about solving anything. It's about watching your own reflection in the problem. Because whether you act or stand still, you're part of the outcome. And sometimes doing nothing is still doing something. Ethics often wear a calm mask, but beneath it, the soul trembles. Not from fear, but from clarity. The clarity that no path is clean. That pain, no matter how minimized, still exists. We are not gods with a bird's eye view. We are humans, walking ground level with blurred vision and trembling hands. What makes this question timeless isn't the logic. It's the intimacy. It forces you to meet yourself at the threshold of decision. Not the self who performs or pretends, but the one who wonders in silence. If I say yes, do I become the villain? If I say no, do I become a coward? And there, morality shifts. Not like a rule book flipping pages, but like candlelight flickering against a wall. You see shadows stretch and shrink depending on where you stand. A barista once said to a customer, "You're ahead in line, but I think she needs the coffee more." A stranger paused, smiled, and nodded. That wasn't ethics in theory. That was ethics in motion. Because more often than not, the trolley doesn't come roaring down the tracks. It comes slowly, in the form of small decisions, in hushed rooms, over late-night texts, or in the tone you use when someone disappoints you. What would you do if no one ever knew? The lever is not just a symbol of action. It's a symbol of self-confrontation. And whether you pull it or walk away, you leave changed. Not because of the outcome, but because you glimpsed who you might be beneath your reasons. In the end, we are not just choosers. We are the stories we tell ourselves after the choice. And now, the rail fades. The echo recedes. Your mind quiets again. One track dissolves into mist. Another bends into the unknown. And we move gently now, from ethics to eternity. Eternal recurrence. What if, just for a moment, you imagined waking up tomorrow and realizing you've already lived this day before? The same sunrise, the same choices, the same quiet ache in your chest when no one replies. And then, what if that same day returned again and again, forever? This is the haunting idea behind eternal recurrence, a thought experiment offered by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He didn't mean it as a scientific theory, but as a spiritual test, a challenge whispered in the dark. Would you be willing to live this life exactly as it is, eternally repeated, without change, without escape? It sounds simple, even poetic, but the weight of it presses deep. Imagine your proudest moment, relived 1,000,000 times. Now imagine your most painful secret, looping through the fabric of existence for all eternity. No edits, no erasing. Two strangers sit on a train as the sky outside turns from blue to orange. "Hey," one says quietly, "do you ever feel like you've been here before? Not déjà vu, more like, this life's on repeat." The other smiles faintly. "Yeah, but sometimes I wonder, if I had to live this all again, would I change anything? Or am I just pretending I ever had a choice?" Nietzsche wasn't asking you to believe the universe actually loops. He was asking something more unsettling. If this life is the only one you'll ever live, would you treat it differently if you knew it would echo forever? Every act of love, every moment of cruelty, every small hesitation you thought no one saw, becomes eternal. Not because time is looping, but because meaning solidifies when you take full ownership of it. Eternal recurrence is not about physics. It's about responsibility. It's about becoming the kind of person who could say, "Yes, I would live this life again. Every mistake, every kiss, every breath." In that sense, the loop isn't a trap, it's a mirror. One that asks, are you proud enough of this version of yourself to meet it endlessly? And if not, when will you begin? Because while time may circle back like a serpent swallowing its own tail, thought still flows forward. Regret can turn to resolve. And in that space between repetition and awareness, something changes. As we step softly into the next level of our dreamlike journey, we carry a question folded deep in the soul. If this is forever, how tenderly should we hold each moment? Let your breath settle. Let the next thought unfold. The Ship of Theseus. Soft winds once blew across a harbor long forgotten, where a ship once stood, noble, weathered, familiar. Over the years, its wood rotted and was replaced, plank by plank, mast by mast, sail by sail, until one day not a single original part remained, and yet it still answered to the same name, Now let that image drift into your own body, quietly, like a question slipping beneath the skin. If every cell in you is replaced over time, every memory reshaped by emotion and forgetfulness, are you still the same you that laughed 10 summers ago? Or cried quietly into a pillow last winter? Do you think we change completely over time? A voice asks in the soft dark. I don't know, comes the reply. Maybe we just become different versions of ourselves, like a book rewritten but keeping the same title. The Ship of Theseus isn't just an old riddle. It's a mirror. Held up to your identity, it reflects more than just flesh and thought. It reflects a process, a rhythm, a melody played across the keys of your lifetime. You wake up every morning slightly changed, and yet something unmistakably familiar breathes beneath your ribs. Not the notes, but the song. And in that, maybe the truth isn't in the parts, but in the continuity of pattern. A river doesn't stop being a river just because its waters flow endlessly forward. You don't stop being you just because your thoughts have new words, your face new lines. Think of an old hoodie you've worn for years, patched, washed, restitched. You outgrow it, maybe, but some part of it still clings to who you were when you first put it on. Not the cloth, the comfort. And so it is with identity. It isn't frozen. It's woven, not built, but breathed. And that breath echoes in every moment you've lived, even as those moments scatter like autumn leaves. I wonder if memories make us more than biology, the voice murmurs again. Maybe memories are the thread, the other whispers, but it's the way we tie them that makes us who we are. Now allow yourself to settle into this quiet realization. You are not bound by what you were, nor limited to what you are. The ship moves, the wind shifts, and still, it sails under your name. Let the melody of that thought carry you, soft, steady, familiar. The tune hasn't ended. It's simply finding its next note. Drift gently forward. The ocean is wide. The stars wait without pressure. The journey continues, even in sleep. The Chinese room. In the dim hush of a dreamlike corridor, where thought drifts like smoke through a locked room, you find yourself standing before a curious door. It creaks open, not into a world of light, but into a puzzle. Inside, someone sits alone, hunched over stacks of unfamiliar characters, Chinese symbols that, to them, carry no meaning. They don't speak the language. They don't feel its poetry. But they've been given a manual, detailed, precise. If someone slips a sentence in Chinese through a slot in the door, they consult the book, follow the instructions, and return the appropriate symbols out the other side. To the observer, the room responds in perfect Chinese. Every question is answered. Every reply feels fluent. But does that mean the person or the room actually understands Chinese? That's the Chinese room, a thought experiment created by philosopher John Searle to challenge artificial intelligence and our assumptions about consciousness. Is output enough? Or is there something more? Some inner spark that turns symbols into meaning? A woman's voice gently breaks the silence. So, if a chatbot says, "I love you," does it mean it? The man beside her chuckles. Depends. Does a mirror love you when it reflects your smile? She muses, watching moonlight ripple across the ceiling. Then what does it mean to know something? He tilts his head thoughtfully. Maybe it's not just about the right answer. Maybe it's about feeling the answer. And in that whisper-soft exchange, we begin to see the divide between simulation and sensation, between mimicking thought and experiencing it. The Chinese room suggests that mere manipulation of information, no matter how complex, may still be hollow. Just because something behaves as if it knows doesn't mean it does. It's like watching a puppet nod to your questions. The motions might be convincing, but who is behind the strings? But then, what about us? Aren't we also reacting to instructions, genetic codes, neural firings, emotional echoes from childhood? How much of our knowing is genuine understanding, and how much is beautifully programmed instinct? The line between intelligence and consciousness begins to blur. The more we try to define it, the more it slips through our fingers like sand. And perhaps that's the point, not to capture the answer, but to sit with the question. The lights dim a little more, the room fades, and as silence returns, you feel the space between what a system does and what it feels like to be the system. Let the room go quiet. Let thought dissolve like ink in water, and follow the stillness into the next level of mind. The Boltzmann Brain. A warm light flickers behind your eyelids. Not a lamp, not the sun, just the quiet awareness that something is here. You're here. But then a whisper from the edge of thought stirs. What if this version of you, this precise moment, wasn't born from a lifetime of memory, but from nothing at all? No past, no parents, just a sudden blink in the void, a lone consciousness adrift in a sea of silence. In the language of physics, it's called the Boltzmann Brain, a theory not meant to frighten, yet strangely haunting. Statistically, they say it's more likely that a single brain, complete with thoughts, feelings, and the illusion of a life lived, could randomly appear in the fabric of empty space than for a whole universe to arise, ordered and vast, from chaos. No planets, no stars, just you, thinking. Two friends sit side by side on a bench as the night stretches thin around them. One breaks the silence. Do you ever feel like everything you've lived could be just a well-timed illusion? The other laughs softly, not mockingly, but as if brushing off a chill. Sometimes, but even if it were, it feels real enough to miss it when it's gone. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? If everything you know, your favorite meal, your oldest scar, your mother's voice, was planted in your mind a breath ago by chance, would it matter less? Would you live less fully? You sip from a glass of water, and for just a moment, feel its coolness with exaggerated clarity. The way the glass presses against your lip, the weight of gravity holding you here. If none of this was earned, if you simply appeared with it, why does it still feel so heavy with meaning? Maybe the point isn't whether you were born from atoms or accidents. Maybe the point is this: you are here. And even if your roots dissolve in uncertainty, your branches still reach for something true. A touch, a smile, a reason to stay. Someone gently taps your shoulder in a dreamlike cafe, their face unfamiliar, their tone light. Hey, sorry to bother you. Is this seat taken? I just need a moment to feel like I exist. You nod, and in that nod, something in you recognizes the same need. You see, the mind doesn't require history to feel real. It only needs attention. And tonight, as you drift, your thoughts don't need a universe behind them to matter. They only need this quiet space, this soft breathing room between questions. So let it be okay not to know. Let the strangeness wrap around you like a light blanket. Not threatening, just curious, just strange enough to make you wonder, but not so loud that it keeps you awake. The Grandfather Paradox. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine stepping through a shimmering doorway, not into the future, but into the past. a time not yet shaped by your choices, a world where your name holds no meaning. And there you are, standing quietly behind a man who has no idea that he will one day become your grandfather. One decision, one breath, and everything could change. But what happens if you stop him before he ever meets your grandmother? The grandfather paradox begins as a simple "what if," but quickly unravels the very fabric of logic. If you go back in time and prevent your grandfather from having children, then logically, you would never be born. But if you're never born, how did you travel back to begin with? The moment you erase your own origin, you create a loop that eats itself, a question with no consistent answer. It's like trying to draw a perfect circle with a broken compass. It looks right until you reach the end and realize you've lost the beginning. Some physicists and philosophers have tried to rescue this paradox with alternate timelines or branching universes. In one reality, you exist. In another, you vanish. But if every action spawns a new world, then is there ever a real past to return to? Or are you simply slipping between shadows, never able to touch the world that made you? The paradox doesn't just challenge the mechanics of time. It haunts our sense of identity. If you were never born, does that mean your memories, your joys, your pain, none of it truly mattered? Would you do it? A voice asks quietly in the dark. Do what? Stop the man who led to everything bad, the one who caused the suffering that made your life what it is. Silence. I don't know. If I did, who would I be now? We want to believe we can rewrite the past. That regret can be undone like a wrong sentence in a notebook. But time resists. It folds, it fractures, it trembles, but it never forgets. Every thread is woven into something larger, and pulling one could unravel the pattern of everything. So maybe time isn't a straight line we walk, but a grand tapestry we live inside of. Touch one thread, and every thread shivers. Not because time is fragile, but because it is deeply, endlessly connected. Now, let's follow that thread. Let's see where it leads next. And now, as your thoughts begin to loosen, as the rhythm of your breath takes the lead, allow that fragile possibility to dissolve like mist in dawn. You've lingered here long enough. The brain in a vat. There's a quiet sort of unease that settles in late at night, when the lights dim and the silence stretches thin. You blink at the ceiling, then close your eyes. And in that moment, a question drifts in, soft as a breath, heavy as eternity. What if this, all of this, is not real? Somewhere in a quiet lab, your brain sits suspended in a clear vat, cradled by warm fluid and tangled wires. Outside the jar, a computer hums softly, feeding your mind a perfect simulation of life. Your favorite coffee shop, the feeling of grass beneath your feet, the laughter of a friend, all carefully coded. Would you even know? One man walks into a bookstore and freezes, not because of the titles, but because the scent, old paper and floor wax, reminds him of a childhood library. He smiles. But if that memory was never real, if it was just programmed, does that smile still mean something? A woman sits by a window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. She feels peace. She texts a friend, "You should see this sky." It looks like it's thinking. But if none of it is real, if even her friend is a line of code, what is she connecting to? These questions don't shout. They don't demand. They whisper. They curl up beside you, like a question mark in the dark. Descartes once said, "I think, therefore I am." But in this thought experiment, even the thinking is suspect. The sensations you trust, Color, pain, hunger, love might be shadows cast on the wall of your jar, and yet there's something oddly comforting in the chaos, because whether the world is built of atoms or algorithms, what matters is how you move through it. That hand you reached for today, that breath you held before speaking your truth, that pause just now where your heart felt soft and still. Even if this is all a dream inside glass and wires, wasn't it still beautiful? Do you ever feel like you're floating? Someone asks as they share a park bench. The other replies, "Only when I forget I'm supposed to be standing." They laugh, and in that laugh, something real flickers. Maybe reality isn't something you confirm with a test. Maybe it's something you feel. 1,000 worlds could be stitched together in code, but only you can create meaning inside them. And meaning, real or virtual, still soothes. So let your thoughts ripple quietly now. Let the possibility of the vat, the wires, the code dissolve. It doesn't matter where your brain resides. It matters where your heart chooses to believe. As the illusion fades into the stillness of this hour, you don't need to decide what's true. Not yet. Not tonight. Let the next thought come gently. Let wonder remain. Laplace's demon. If a mind knew everything, every particle's position, every force acting upon it, would it be able to see the future perfectly and without error? Imagine, just for a moment, a consciousness so vast and so precise that it could look at the present and know the entire future, from the fall of a leaf to the rise of a civilization. This is the thought experiment known as Laplace's demon, proposed by the French physicist Pierre-Simon Laplace in the early 19th century. This hypothetical entity was not a god, but a perfect calculator, a being that, given the exact state of the universe at one moment, could compute all its past and future moments like a clockwork symphony. Nothing would be uncertain. Nothing would be free. Everything, your thoughts, your choices, your dreams, would be the inevitable result of prior causes, stretching back to the birth of time itself. Picture a girl sitting by a window, wondering whether to move to a new city. She weighs her options, feels torn, and finally decides to leave. To her, it feels like a free choice, but to Laplace's demon, that choice was determined long ago by her genetics, her upbringing, the neurons firing in her brain at that precise moment. The feeling of freedom was just the shadow of ignorance. "Do you believe in fate?" one voice asks in the quiet. "I don't know," the other replies. "Sometimes I feel like I'm steering the ship. Other times I think I'm just watching it sail." Laplace's idea, though rooted in Newtonian mechanics, whispers something profound to us even now. In a world that feels increasingly calculated by algorithms, predictions, and data, is there room left for mystery, for spontaneity, for that split-second spark when you say, "I choose this"? Modern physics, especially quantum theory, has since complicated Laplace's vision. Uncertainty, randomness, and probabilities have replaced the clean lines of determinism, but the ghost of his demon still haunts us, especially in moments of doubt. Was this my decision? Or was it always going to happen? And if the future is written, word by word, before we speak it, who is the true author? Let the question linger, not to trap you, but to free you. Because whether or not Laplace's demon exists, we still live in the wonder of unknowing. From the all-knowing to the unknowable, the journey of consciousness continues, one thought at a time. The paradox of nothing. There's a silence some call empty, but if you listen, truly listen, not with your ears, but with the softest part of your awareness. You'll hear something stirring, a hum low and ancient. We've been taught that nothing means absence, but physics disagrees. Even the vacuum of space isn't truly void. It pulses with invisible energy. Virtual particles wink into existence, then vanish, like secrets whispered and swallowed in the same breath. And philosophers? They've always stood quietly at the edge of this enigma. Heidegger once asked, "Why is there something rather than nothing?" It's a question that doesn't want an answer. It wants your presence. A woman once stood at a bus stop, rain in her hair, asking no one in particular, "Do you ever get the feeling something important is about to happen, even when nothing's happening?" The man next to her simply nodded. They said no more. But the silence that followed was fuller than any explanation, because maybe nothingness isn't the enemy we avoid. Maybe it's the cradle of becoming. Not emptiness, but potential. A breath held, not because it's afraid, but because it's preparing. Think of how the soil looks still before it sprouts, how your heartbeat pauses between each thump. Even sleep, they say, is not the absence of thought, but the reorganization of it. There's a kind of pause just before dawn breaks, where everything in the world holds its breath. And it's in that breath that birth begins, not with sound, not with action, but with space. A boy once leaned over a book he didn't understand, staring at a blank page between chapters. His sister asked if he was bored. "No," he said, "I think this page is where the story breathes." So perhaps nothing is not lack. It's invitation, an open hand, a still lake before the ripple, a quiet so whole it can hold anything. The next time you feel lost in the void, uncertain, still, unsure, listen for that subtle flicker, the whisper of what wants to come next, not because you chase it, but because you finally allowed the space for it to arrive. We often try to fill the silence, but sometimes the silence fills us. Let us rest then, just for a moment, in that sacred pause before the next thought begins. The paradox of the heap, Sorites paradox. In a quiet desert at dawn, a single grain of sand rests under the windless sky. It's small, insignificant, alone. No one would call it a heap. Then a second grain lands beside it. Still, not a heap. A third, a tenth, 100. At what point exactly does a few grains become many? When does a gathering become a pile, and a pile become a heap? This is the essence of the Sorites paradox, a riddle whispered by ancient Greek philosophers, unsettling in its simplicity. It plays with the boundaries of vague concepts, unraveling the trust we place in gradual change. If a man with a full head of hair loses one strand, he's still not bald. But how many must he lose before the title fits? If we can't point to a clear threshold, does the concept itself collapse? In our daily lives, we rely on these fuzzy edges more than we admit. Words like rich, tall, old, or happy seem so solid until we try to draw their lines. How rich is rich enough? How much sadness cancels out joy? This paradox nudges us to see that many of the labels we use are not rooted in fixed truth, but in social consensus, perception, and gradual shifts. There's no alarm that sounds when someone becomes wise or when a friend turns into a stranger. It just happens, slowly. One evening, conversation captures this subtle descent. "Do you think you've changed?" Maybe a little, just small things. But it's been years. "Aren't you someone else now?" "I don't know. I still feel like me. Just not the same." That's the slope we walk. We shed identities grain by grain, jobs, beliefs, people we love. and yet we still call ourselves by the same name. But if each moment rewrites a fraction of us, when do we cross into someone new? This paradox also casts its shadow on morality. A small lie feels harmless. Add another, and another. At which point do we become dishonest? When does kindness shift into enabling? When does silence become complicity? The heap never arrives all at once. It builds quietly while we tell ourselves, just one more grain. Perhaps that's the hidden lesson. That clarity isn't always about finding the line, but recognizing the slope. In a world made of shifting sands, we must tread carefully, mindful of where we stand and where one more grain might take us. So as we step forward, ask yourself, if you took one more breath, one more risk, or one more act of love, could that be the moment your life becomes a heap of meaning? Let's take one more step. The illusion of self. There's a soft hush in the room, like something is about to be remembered, but never fully grasped. You close your eyes. The voice inside your head quiets for a moment, and in that stillness, a strange question appears. Who are you when you're not thinking? The answer doesn't rush in, it hovers, just out of reach. A mist curling around a shape you can't quite name. You might say, well, I'm me. But then the thought drifts. What exactly does that mean? Modern neuroscience whispers gently into the silence that what we call I is not a singular core, but a pattern, a flickering of sensations. A story told so often we've forgotten it was ever a tale. Meanwhile, Buddhist philosophy stands nearby, smiling like someone who already knows. It teaches that the self is like a candle flame, burning brightly, yet never the same from moment to moment. One evening, two strangers sat side by side on a bench at the edge of a city park. The older one looked out at the reflection of trees in the lake and said, "You ever get the feeling you're watching yourself more than being yourself?" The younger one replied, "All the time. Especially when I laugh at things I don't find funny. I'm not sure if it's me laughing or just something I learned to do." And that's the quiet truth nestled at the heart of this segment. We become what we repeat, what we react to, what we're told we are. But beneath all that, beneath the layers of childhood echoes, favorite songs, social masks, and silent regrets, there's something else. Not a person, not even a personality, just awareness, noticing, receiving, watching thoughts the way one watches clouds from a train window, passing, changing, never staying. And if this awareness is real, if it's the only thing that doesn't come and go, then maybe the self is less a captain steering the ship and more the ocean it sails upon. There's a strange freedom in that. If no solid self exists, then maybe the suffering isn't yours to carry. Maybe anger doesn't belong to you. Maybe grief is just weather, passing through the vast open sky of awareness. You are not the storm. You are the space it moves through. A barista once gave an extra drink to someone and said, "Don't know why, just felt like it." The customer smiled, not knowing what to say. Later that night, she told a friend, "That small moment felt more me than anything I did all week." Perhaps we're most ourselves when we stop trying to be. So tonight, let the stories go. Let the roles soften. You don't need to be anything right now. You don't need to fix, prove, or remember. You can just be. And in this being, feel the quiet truth ripple across your mind like moonlight across water. There is no fixed you, no hard center, only the dance of light on waves. As your reflection fades into the dark glass of thought, the next mystery gently waits, like a door half open, humming softly, asking nothing but your presence. Gödel's Incompleteness Theorem. There's a kind of silence that follows a solved puzzle, that breath between clarity and what lingers just beyond it. You may feel that quiet now, not because everything is resolved, but because something deeper has just stepped forward, unannounced. Gödel didn't chase uncertainty. He simply asked a question logic had never dared to whisper aloud. Can a system explain itself entirely? And when he answered, quietly, methodically, he didn't break mathematics. He illuminated its shadow. His theorems, like soft footsteps on fresh snow, revealed that even perfect logic has limits, that some truths will always live just outside the reach of proof. Two people sit in a late-night diner, empty except for the low hum of a fridge. One stirs her coffee slowly, staring at the swirl of cream. "Do you think everything can be figured out?" she asks. The man across from her blinks, then smiles without certainty. "Sometimes I think the things that matter most don't want to be solved, just noticed." In a way, Gödel's insight feels like that. Not the crash of a theory breaking down, but the hush of realization. That even within the most perfect system, be it mathematics, morality, or your own mind, there will always be statements you know in your bones, but cannot write into a law. It's like trying to map a dream while still dreaming, or explaining love with grammar, or giving a name to the way your chest tightens when someone says, "I forgive you," and means it. Some truths, it seems, aren't meant to be proven, just carried. And maybe that's the point. Not to chase the final answer, but to sit with the questions that echo softly, like the ticking of a watch in a darkened room. You can't see the hands move, but you feel the time pass. You feel it when a memory arrives without warning. When a stranger's gesture stays in your mind long after you've parted ways. When you know something is right, even if no one would agree. A man once walked out of a lecture, paused by the staircase, and muttered under his breath, "Even numbers can't explain how my daughter makes me laugh." It wasn't about the math. It was about the threshold, where logic ends and life begins. So here we are, at that threshold. And if you feel a little lost, that's okay. The truth is not always a map. Sometimes it's a lantern, dim, flickering, but real. Let that soft glow carry you a little further, past the final page, beyond the last theorem. Let us walk beyond numbers now, into something wordless, something whole. The Infinite Library, Borges' Library of Babel. Somewhere in the dark folds of a quiet dream, a voice whispers, "What if every truth and every lie already exists, hidden in a library too vast to imagine?" This is the haunting world Jorge Luis Borges once dared to describe, a library infinite in size, containing every book that could ever be written, not just stories or history books, but books filled with every possible combination of letters, commas, and periods. In such a place, there is a book that tells the exact story of your life, from your first breath to the one you'll take tomorrow. There's a book that reveals what your mother never told you, another that contains the cure for every illness, and 10 billion others that spell nothing but gibberish. Two people sit on the floor of such a library, their backs against opposite shelves. "Do you think your book is here?" One asks, voice soft as dust. The other smiles, eyes still scanning the indecipherable lines. "I think everyone's is, but how would I know it when I found it?" That's the tragedy and the miracle. In a space where every book exists, every secret hides in plain sight. But the truth doesn't shine. It doesn't announce itself. It drowns in the noise. Imagine spending your life searching through endless volumes each offering a flicker of hope, only for that glimmer to collapse into chaos. One sentence makes sense, then unravels. A paragraph feels eerily familiar, then breaks into nonsense. It's like trying to remember a dream you never had. And yet, the idea lingers. What if? What if you did find it? A single book among the stars of shelves that captures your soul perfectly. Would you be ready to read it? Would it bring you peace or terror? Because if your story is already written, what does that mean for choice? For free will? Maybe, just maybe. That's why most of the books are nonsense. The universe isn't interested in giving you clarity. It just provides the possibility. Meaning is something you give, not something you find. The Library of Babel isn't just a thought experiment. It's a mirror of life itself. So much information, so many voices, so many directions. Most of it leads nowhere, but every once in a while there's a sentence, a moment, a connection that feels right, as if the book paused and looked back at you. The person with the soft voice closes the book they were holding. Maybe the point isn't to find the truth, they murmur, but to learn how to search. And the other nods. Maybe the truth is just the part that changes you. So we turn the page, knowing we may never reach the end, but still, we read. Somewhere, in the ink, the next line is waiting. The delayed choice experiment. Let's listen more closely now. There's a quiet hum in the air, like something waiting to be decided, not by the world, but by you. The moment hasn't passed, yet it already has, and somehow it's waiting on something that hasn't happened. A breath held, a coin in midair, a choice suspended in silence. In the stillness of quantum physics, there's an experiment that feels more like a riddle whispered by the universe itself. The delayed choice experiment. It tells us something so strange, it feels like myth, until the math confirms it. A particle moves through space, and at the very last moment, we decide how to observe it. Only then, it reveals what path it took, as if it reached back into its own past and rewrote it to fit the present. So you're saying, the past changed? The other voice leans in, curious but calm. Not quite. It's more like, the past remained open, and it only closed once we paid attention. It's like asking someone, where were you yesterday? And their answer depends on the tone in your voice. Did you ask as a friend, a stranger, or a judge? The answer isn't just about fact. It's about relation, the dance between question and response. Suddenly, you remember little moments. You opened the fridge, thinking you'd forgotten the milk, but there it was. You were certain you hadn't put it back, but now you're not so sure. Did you misremember? Or did your attention rewrite a trivial memory? A flicker of time folding into itself, where cause and effect spiral into a soft loop, one where the observer participates in shaping the event, not just watching it. In this experiment, photons pass through slits, forming patterns that shouldn't exist, unless, somehow, they knew in advance how they'd be measured. But they can't know, can they? Unless time itself isn't a one-way street. Maybe it curls, maybe it listens. There's something gently unnerving about it, like trying to remember whether you dreamed something or actually said it aloud. Reality might not be a timeline, it might be a negotiation, a back and forth between now and then. Two people exit a quiet theater late at night. One says, "Was that scene in the middle always there?" The other pauses. "I don't know. I didn't notice it the first time." But there was no first time. Or maybe there was, and it's still unfolding. The implications trail behind the words like perfume in the dark. If the future can reach back and touch the past, then what else might be open? Regret? Forgiveness? A missed opportunity, quietly waiting to be reinterpreted by who you are now, not who you were then. Not everything is locked. Some things are listening. And now, as the night deepens, the question changes shape. It's no longer about particles or photons. It's about how you remember yourself, the version of you in old photographs. The one who made that decision, or didn't. Did that person already know who you would become? Or are you still reaching back, softly, curiously, reshaping your own path? Rest now. The answer might arrive just as your eyes close. Or maybe it already did. The ship inside your head. Inside your skull, behind your eyes, and just above the curve of your spine, sits a silent, sealed chamber, a dark, moist cavern where light has never entered, where sound has never echoed. And yet, this is where you see the sky. This is where you hear the waves. This is where you fall in love. Every sunrise, every voice, every color, every taste of the world, somehow, they all arrive in this cave, and none of them come in directly. Plato once described a group of prisoners chained in a cave, watching shadows dance across the wall. They believe those shadows are the whole of reality because it's all they've ever seen. And today, neuroscience whispers something eerily similar. You are still in that cave. But the projector isn't on the wall. It's in your mind. Your brain receives electric signals, patterns of light and vibration. It has never seen the world directly. It has only ever interpreted. A soft knock breaks the silence. Two friends walking by the ocean. Hey, do you think the blue we both see is really the same? What do you mean? I mean, what if the blue I see is your green? We'd never know, right? He laughs. Yeah, wild. But then, what's real? That's the ship inside your head, a vessel made of perception, drifting across a sea of interpretations. Sound is not sound until your brain says so. Color isn't out there. It's something the brain paints onto photons. Even time, the most concrete of all, is elastic in the folds of memory and imagination. So what do we really know? We think we walk through a world of objects, but perhaps we walk through meanings. A cup is not porcelain. It is warmth. It is routine. It is comfort after grief. The tree is not bark and leaves. It's where your grandfather sat and told you stories. Reality isn't what we see. It's what we feel about what we see. If your brain is simulating the world, then what lies outside that simulation? Is there anything? Or is this all we get? A rich, beautiful dream that feels real enough to cry in. The longer you sit with this idea, the softer the borders become. The mind stops demanding answers and starts floating. There is a strange kind of peace in accepting that you are not touching the world. You are only ever touching your mind's idea of it. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it has always been enough. The conversation picks up again. So, if it's all in our heads, does that mean nothing is real? No, the other replies gently. It means everything you feel is as real as it ever needs to be. Close your eyes. Open your mind. The many worlds interpretation. You reach for the cup and pause, just a moment. In that hesitation, something invisible unfolds. One version of you picks it up, another doesn't. And somewhere, in the hush between choices, a universe splits like silk. That's how it begins, not with noise, but with a whisper. Quantum theory proposes something wild and strangely gentle. Every choice, no matter how small, doesn't erase the others. It multiplies them. Every possibility, followed through. every fork in the path, taken somewhere. You do not simply move forward through time. You branch endlessly. Two friends sit on a bench beneath a dim station lamp. One asks quietly, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd just said yes that day?" The other shrugs, then smiles. "Maybe you did. Somewhere." That's the strangeness, isn't it? Not regret, but echoes. Possibilities that didn't die, but wandered off into parallel corridors, still living lives you only sense in dreams or déjà vu. You might think you're the only version, but physics suggests otherwise. There are versions of you who never met that person, who took the train instead of the job, who whispered instead of stayed silent. And yet here you are, listening, in this thread of the tapestry, the one that led you not to fame or ruin or glory, but to stillness, to wonder, to this very breath. A soft breeze rattles a closed window. Maybe in one world it's open. Maybe in another you got up and shut it already. These are not fantasies. They are frames in an infinite reel. And somehow your consciousness has chosen this seat in the theater, this perspective. So what does that make you? Are you the lucky one? The conscious node? The quiet witness that floats, not above, but within the many yous? Or maybe luck is the wrong word. Maybe what matters is not which version you are, but how you choose to be with the one you've become. And so, we breathe. Not because it changes the world, but because it centers us in this one. We let go, not of the other versions, but of the need to control them. Close your eyes. Let the other selves wander. You're safe here, in this now, this room, this thought. Another version might still be chasing answers, but this one is learning to sleep. The curtain between worlds softens. In the hush beyond thought, we step gently into the next idea. The map and the territory. Somewhere between memory and meaning, your mind is drawing lines, quiet lines, invisible lines, and yet, lines that try to make sense of everything. You might call them ideas, frameworks, beliefs, but underneath, they are just maps of what you think is real. A man once said, "The map is not the territory." That man was Alfred Korzybski, and he wasn't talking about GPS or guidebooks. He was talking about you. Your mind doesn't hold reality. It holds a story of reality. And that story, as vivid as it seems, is not the world itself. "Wait," she asked, looking up from her cup of tea. "So, my opinions, my beliefs, even my memories, are they just sketches?" He smiled gently. "Not lies," he said, "just summaries. Like drawing a mountain range with two wavy lines. It's close, but you'll never feel the cold air or hear the silence of snow from a drawing. And that's the heart of it. We survive by simplifying. Your brain has to filter billions of sensations every second. It can't process the scent of every leaf, the sound of every drop of rain. So it compresses, it prioritizes, it maps. But once that map is drawn, we start to treat it as truth. We tell ourselves stories like, "This is who I am. This is what people are like. This is what love feels like. This is how the world works." But what if those stories were only shortcuts? Not lies, but illusions, comforting ones. Mental scaffolding meant to help you function, not understand. A child sees a flame and learns it's hot. The lesson works, but the flame becomes just danger, and its beauty vanishes. That's the cost of a map. It's useful, but incomplete. And if you've ever argued with someone who saw the same event and came away with a totally different story, you've seen this in action. Two people, same territory, different maps, and they both swear they're right. "I always thought I knew my mother," one man said in a whisper. "But after she passed, I found letters, and it was like meeting someone new. I only had the version of her that I needed her to be." That's what happens when the sketch replaces the sky. We confuse models with meaning. We replace presence with prediction. We stop asking questions because we believe we already know. But maps can be redrawn. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. So as your mind drifts tonight, loosen your grip on the things you're sure of. Let go of the outlines. Release the labels. Listen not to the name of the bird, but to its song. Let go of the map. And in that gentle unknowing, you might finally touch the territory. The hard problem of consciousness. Somewhere behind your eyes, something stirs, not just neurons, not just chemical sparks, but the unmistakable feeling that you are here, that you are watching, feeling, being, not just reacting, but living from the inside out. And it's so easy to miss, because it's always been there. Why does anything feel like anything at all? Why does the sound of distant rain carry melancholy? Why does a single note on a piano tug at something behind the ribs? You can chart the waves on a brain scan. You can label the auditory cortex. But nowhere in the folds of tissue can you find the echo of sorrow or the warmth of a memory. Neuroscience is extraordinary. It shows us the wiring of thought. It explains how we move, how we speak, how we survive. But it can't quite tell us why the lights are on inside. The red apple triggers specific receptors. But why does the color red feel red? Why does it shimmer with meaning, while its physical properties remain flat and measurable? A woman on the train once whispered to her friend, "I keep dreaming of waves." Not the ocean, just the idea of waves. Her friend smiled. "That's like my dreams of being chased. There's no place, no person, just the feeling of being hunted." They didn't try to explain it. They just understood that something deeper was happening, beneath language, beyond logic. This is what philosophers and scientists call the hard problem of consciousness. It's not about how the brain computes. It's about why it lights up with sensation. You can build a robot that responds to pain, but can you make it feel pain? And if not, what's missing? Maybe the answer isn't in the circuits, but in the silence between them. Maybe awareness isn't built. Maybe it blooms. A man once asked the cashier if he could cut the line. "Only if you promise to smile when your coffee's ready," she said, half teasing. He smiled back, not because of the rule, but because he felt seen. A moment of consciousness passed between them, wordless and shared. Some say consciousness is an illusion. Others argue it's the only thing that's real. What if awareness isn't just a feature of the brain, but a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or time? At night, when you lie in bed, you don't need proof that you're awake inside. The proof is the feeling itself. You're not just watching thoughts, you are the watcher. And now, as your thoughts soften, as the rhythm of your breath begins to rock you inward, let the mystery remain a mystery, because behind your eyes, something watches, quiet, gentle, unexplainably you. The paradox of choice. She stood in the aisle, eyes darting across 50 shades of breakfast cereal, oats with honey, almond clusters, grain-free, low sugar, high fiber. He nudged her lightly, a quiet smile on his face. "What's taking so long?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know anymore. The more I look, the less I want to decide." And isn't that how life feels sometimes? The world tells us freedom is choice. The more choices we have, the freer we become. But deep beneath that surface, beneath the glossy packaging of infinite options, something shifts. The soul, overwhelmed, begins to stumble. This is what Barry Schwartz calls the paradox of choice. He suggests that when everything is possible, nothing feels right. That when you're given every path, your feet freeze at the crossroads. It sounds strange, doesn't it? That too much of a good thing, freedom, can weigh on us like a burden. But think back to the job offers you couldn't decide between, to the dating apps that made real connection harder, to the nights you scrolled for hours and watched nothing. Because when every door is open, none feels sacred. In that flood of options, our mind does something curious. It begins to imagine not what is, but what might have been. We think of the shoes we didn't buy, the vacation we didn't take, the person we didn't text back, and slowly, choice turns into comparison, comparison into regret, and regret into a low hum of dissatisfaction that haunts even our happiest moments. She finally reached for the box, granola with cinnamon and dates. "Is that the one?" he asked. "Maybe," she said softly. "Maybe not. But I'm done searching." And maybe that's the lesson, that peace is not found in the perfect choice, but in making one and resting in it. That real freedom doesn't mean having every road. It means walking one with presence, without turning back, without peeking into the doors you didn't enter. Sometimes it's not the world outside that cages us. It's the noise of endless what-ifs echoing in our own minds. But when you quiet the noise, when you gently let the other doors close, something beautiful happens. The path you're on begins to unfold with grace. It feels lighter, realer, yours. So let the other doors close quietly behind you, not because they were wrong, but because you've chosen something worth staying for. And in that silence, peace returns. The memory illusion. A soft murmur drifts through your thoughts like fog across a childhood field. And just like that, your favorite memory appears. Clear, warm, familiar. But pause for a moment. Let it hover. Was it always this vivid? Or is it just vivid now? There's something strange about the mind's photo album. The more you flip through it, the more it seems to rearrange itself. The people look the same. The smile is still there. But the lighting? Different. The angle? Warmer, perhaps. Each time you visit that moment, your mind isn't playing it back like a video. It's painting it again. By hand. From scratch. "Hey," someone once said quietly at a family gathering, "You remember when we got lost on the mountain trail?" You nod. You laugh. But in your mind, it was sunny. They pause. No, it was raining. And suddenly your memory shivers. Did the sun really shine that day? Or was it just how you wanted to remember it? That's the thing about memory. It isn't loyal to the truth. It's loyal to you, to your current mood, your current need. It adapts so that you can carry on. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature. The brain, like a careful editor, keeps adjusting the story so it fits who you are now, not who you were. Even trauma reshapes under new lighting. Even triumph gets redrawn when the ego needs comfort. So when you think of your past, know this: you're not just remembering, you're rewriting. I always thought my grandfather gave me that compass when I turned 10, someone says to a stranger on a train. But then they frown. Or maybe it was 12. Or maybe I bought it at a market and just liked that version better. There's no accusation in this realization, just softness. Like watching an old photo fade a little more each year, but learning to love it anyway. If memory changes, then so do you. And if your history isn't fixed, Maybe your identity isn't either. You are not bound to your past because your past is not a stone. It's water, shifting, reflecting, flowing through the shape of who you are tonight. What you did, what you said, even what you swore you'd never forget, may have already changed form. And that's not deceit. That's how the self protects itself, gently, artfully, unconsciously. So if you ever feel haunted by a memory, know that it's just a painting in motion. You can let it blur. You can let it breathe. There's comfort in this fluidity. Not everything must be certain to be meaningful. Not every detail must be perfect to be real. So now, softly, close that photo album in your mind. Let the pages rest. Let the next thought come. Quiet as dusk, ready to reshape itself again. The Bootstrap Paradox, a song with no composer, a book with no author, a whisper from the future that becomes its own echo in the past. The Bootstrap Paradox isn't just a riddle, it's a soft unraveling of logic itself, like watching a candle melt before you ever lit it. In this spiral of time, cause and effect don't chase each other. They fold, they loop, and somehow, they both arrive at the same point, without ever starting. Imagine this. A scientist in the year 2070 receives a mysterious notebook filled with advanced theories. Using it, she revolutionizes the world. Years later, before her final breath, she sends the notebook back in time to her younger self. The younger version reads it, follows it, builds upon it, and sends it forward again. But where did the original idea come from? No one ever wrote it. It simply always was. One evening, as the rain whispered against the window pane, a soft conversation floated across the kitchen table. "Hey," she asked, stirring her tea absent-mindedly, "if I hum a tune I heard in a dream, then someone records it. Was it ever truly composed?" He looked up from his book, eyebrows raised. Only if dreams count as composers. What if the tune came from the future? They laughed, but the question lingered. The Bootstrap Paradox seduces the mind into this loop, one where something emerges not from a clear origin, but from a self-referential loop that never began. It's not just science fiction anymore. Some physicists entertain the idea that information might do this, that somewhere in the folds of space-time, data could be caught in a causal feedback loop. You read what you'll later write. You receive what you'll one day send. And then, it gets deeper. If objects, messages, or even ideas can exist without creation, what does that say about reality? Maybe we're not walking a straight line from past to future. Maybe we're spiraling. Maybe your thoughts today are echoes of tomorrow, and time is less of a river and more of a whirlpool. Close your eyes for a second and ask yourself, what's the first memory of the person you've become? What if that memory is borrowed from someone you haven't yet been? The mind starts to dissolve a little here. Not from fear, but from awe. We tend to think of beginnings as sacred, as necessary. But the Bootstrap Paradox gently whispers, perhaps not everything begins. Perhaps some things are simply caught in the rhythm of existing. And isn't that what a dream sometimes feels like? A moment that just was, without context, without history, but vivid and full of meaning. Now, as this loop spirals into the night, listen for the faint hum of ideas that seem too perfect to trace. Thoughts that feel planted before you thought them. Words that feel remembered, not invented. As the spiral turns, we arrive at level next. The paradox of the present. There's something oddly slippery about this very second. You reach for it, think you've got it, and it's already moved on, like trying to hold on to the silence between two heartbeats. And still, we speak of now as if it's a solid place we can walk into and sit down inside. Two friends walk along a quiet street at dusk. One of them says, "Wait, stop. This sunset, I want to remember it forever." The other smiles. "You already missed it. It was 2 blinks ago." They laugh, but the moment leaves something behind, something neither of them can name. You've probably felt it yourself, that strange delay between an experience and the story your mind tells about it. By the time you say, "This is happening," it isn't. Not exactly. It was. The present never stands still long enough to meet you. Every time you greet it, it's already in the past. And yet, you live there, somehow, in that gentle blur between memory and anticipation. It's a space that doesn't freeze, doesn't frame, only flows. A soft stream under your thoughts, always just ahead of the step you're taking. The more you try to hold it still, the more it escapes like mist slipping off warm skin. Maybe that's the mistake, believing that now is something we're supposed to catch. But what if it's not a thing to possess, but a rhythm to listen to? Like music, you don't pause a note to enjoy it. You move with it, let it pass through you. Presence isn't capture, it's surrender. One evening, someone waiting in line at a late-night diner asks the person behind them, "You think this is a good time or a bad one?" The stranger answers, "It's both, or neither. It's just the time we're in." Their eyes meet, just long enough to notice, and then it's over. The moment didn't stay, but something gentle settled between them. So perhaps presence isn't a pinpoint on a timeline. Maybe it's a vibration, always humming, always shifting. Like a breath you can't hold too long, or a wave you can only ride by letting go of the shore. If you're still chasing it, take a breath. Let it come to you instead. Not as a thing to name, but as a feeling to trust. And if, somewhere in this moment, your eyes begin to drift closed, it's okay. Sleep is not leaving. It's arriving. Like time, it comes when you stop trying to catch it. Let time slip softly through your fingers. Let's follow its flow. The paradox of language. They sat on the edge of the bed, the kind of quiet that fills a room not with absence, but with presence. He asked her, "Do you ever feel like no word is ever enough?" She smiled, eyes distant. "All the time, like I'm trying to pour the ocean into a teacup." Language is our gift and our cage. With it, we reach across space and time, carve memories into sound, wrap feelings into phrases. But the moment we name something, we tame it. The word love is not the warmth in your chest. The word grief cannot ache the way your chest does when no one is watching. Each word is a net, catching pieces of the infinite and pulling them down into the smallness of speech. Yet we go on, don't we? Talking, writing, whispering our way through meaning. Why? Maybe it's because words are the closest thing we have to holding each other's minds. Still, even as we speak, something escapes, something essential. A poet might try to describe the moonlight on water, but no phrase, however lyrical, will make your skin feel that chill, or your eyes squint in that precise shimmer. And when we say, "I miss you," there's an entire landscape behind it, one of memories, dreams, aching silences that no sentence can carry. Perhaps that's the paradox. We use language to connect, but also to separate. To define is to draw a line, and to draw a line is to say, "This is not that." In describing, we reduce. In naming, we confine. The wildness of feeling, the complexity of consciousness, the terror and awe of being alive, all of it too large for grammar to contain. She turned back to him, her voice now barely a breath. "Do you think we'll ever have the right words?" He looked at her, then at the ceiling. Maybe the right words are the ones we don't say. Silence isn't empty. It's saturated with presence. In some cultures, silence between two people means complete understanding. No explanation needed, no performance required, just existence. Some truths can't be said. They ripple beneath language, like whales beneath the sea. You only know they're there when something stirs. We speak, and we misstep. We name, and we forget. But in the spaces between words, perhaps the truth breathes. Maybe silence isn't the opposite of language. Maybe it's its most honest form. So let's pause now. Let the words fall away. Let your thoughts drift into that space where feeling begins, but vocabulary ends. And let's listen now to what words cannot say. The illusion of awakening. A soft wind brushes the curtains, as if something unseen were breathing just outside the window. You think you've arrived, that finally, after the questions, the books, the long stares into nothing, you've woken up. But have you? A man steps onto the late-night bus, his eyes bright with realization. "I used to believe in things," he tells the driver, smiling. "Now I just see." The driver nods, shifts gears, and says nothing. But somewhere behind that silence, the engine hums like it knows something more. Awakening can feel like an arrival, a shiver down the spine, a letting go. But what if it's just another chapter in the same dream? We start by questioning the world, then we question the self. But when we say, "I am awake," have we simply traded one illusion for another? One ego mask for a shinier, more enlightened one? She pours tea in the quiet kitchen, telling her friend, "Ever since that retreat, I feel like I finally understand." He stirs his cup. "Yeah?" he asks gently. "And what happens when that understanding breaks too?" She laughs, but something flickers in her eyes. There's a strange comfort in naming yourself as awakened. It gives the mind a perch, a label to hold on to in the fog. But maybe true clarity is when you no longer need the label at all. The paradox deepens. The more we seek to wake up, the more the search itself becomes a story, one that centers you as the hero, a spiritual autobiography of triumph. But stories, even beautiful ones, are still dreams in disguise. Think of a candle slowly burning in a room full of mirrors. Each reflection thinks it's the source, but only one flame is real, and even that is fading. A voice asks in the back of your mind, "If I no longer need to awaken, what am I?" And the silence that follows doesn't answer, but it feels like the beginning of something purer. There's a man sitting on a bench with a closed book in his lap. A child walks past and asks, "Why aren't you reading?" He smiles and replies, "I was, but now I'm listening." So we let go, not to fall back asleep, but to stop clinging to the idea that we're finally awake. Drift gently now, if even awakening is a costume. What dances beneath the skin? The night breathes deeper, and in its breath, we release even this. What remains? Let's find out in the next moment of stillness. Sacred silence. There's a silence that doesn't echo with emptiness, but vibrates with presence. Not the kind of silence that fills a void, but the kind that reveals something hidden beneath the noise. It is the sound of a world holding its breath. It is not mute, it is listening, and it waits gently for you to do the same. In the hush of a Zen temple, where the air is thick with incense and attention, silence becomes a gate. No chimes, no chants, just breath and space. In Quaker meetings, people gather not to speak, but to feel the weight of presence. No one commands the moment. It unfolds. Words are allowed to dissolve, and what remains is not absence, but sacred attention. Why don't they say anything? A man once asked while watching a Quaker gathering. His friend answered, maybe they're saying more than words ever could. Even science has begun to bow its head toward this ancient wisdom. Neuroscience tells us that silence doesn't just slow the mind, it rewires it. In moments of silence, the brain shifts away from the chatter of the default mode network, the system responsible for the running commentary in our heads. With fewer inner voices competing, clarity emerges. Thought becomes less frantic, more precise. A kind of healing begins in the space where we once filled every second with noise. Do you ever just sit without music or your phone? She asked, stirring her tea. Not really, he admitted. Silence makes me restless. Maybe that restlessness is just your mind detoxing, she smiled. Like a body learning to breathe after too much noise. In a world addicted to distraction, silence becomes an act of rebellion. It is choosing not to react, not to explain, not to justify. It is choosing instead to feel. And in that stillness, the world grows louder in different ways. The rustle of a leaf, the beat of your heart, the presence of someone sitting beside you in mutual stillness. Silence, then, is not nothing. It is everything we ignore when we are busy speaking. But silence is not always peaceful. At first, it confronts us. It holds up a mirror to our inner chatter, and for some, that's uncomfortable. Yet if we can stay in it long enough, something begins to shift. Silence becomes not a void to escape, but a presence to trust. It becomes a companion, a wise elder, a teacher without a tongue, and yet with a voice more honest than words. Perhaps that's why in many spiritual traditions, silence isn't a pause, it's a practice. It is sacred not because it's quiet, but because it reveals. It is sacred because it doesn't compete, because in the absence of our performance, something real begins to show itself. So if you find yourself in a moment of stillness tonight, try not to fill it. Don't rush to cover it with thought or entertainment. Just stay. Let silence rest beside you like a sleeping animal. It may seem still, but something inside it is watching, listening, becoming. Stay quiet now, and let the next mystery arrive without needing a name. The Multiverse Within. There's a quiet truth you carry, soft as a whisper, but as vast as stars. It's the feeling that you're not just one thing, not just one story playing out on a single reel of film. You're more like a shifting library, full of scripts, some unread, some rehearsed only once in a dream. Sometimes when you walk into a room and feel strangely at home, or unnervingly foreign, it's not just déjà vu. It's the echo of a path you could have walked, a version of you who made one different choice, turned left instead of right, said yes instead of staying silent. And that version still lingers, not in some faraway universe, but in your own mind, folded between neurons like pages in an unwritten book. A man once waited in line at a bus stop, wearing the same jacket he wore every day. Another man beside him, about his age, chuckled and asked, "Do you ever think about what your life would have been if you'd taken that job offer back in '03? There was a long pause. Then the first man replied softly, "Every morning when I zip this jacket up." Psychologist Carl Jung suggested that within the psyche are not just fragments, but whole realities waiting for expression. He didn't call it a multiverse, but the spirit was the same. Inside each of us is a kaleidoscope of possibilities. One version of you is bold, one is gentle, one forgives quickly, another holds grudges like a second skin. You're all of them, and yet none of them completely. We tend to believe we are our habits, or our wounds, or our resumes, but those are only costumes the psyche wears to make sense of a single day. Beneath them all, there's a chorus of selves, and they hum softly in the background until life calls them forward. Sometimes, the softest nudge is enough to bring a new one to life. A stranger holds the door open just long enough and says, "Looks like you're right on time. That's always a good sign." And somehow, you become the version of yourself that believes in signs, just for a moment, just long enough to smile back. This is the miracle we overlook. Every choice is an audition. Every small act is a casting call. You're not faking it, you're selecting it, calling forth the self most ready to respond to this version of reality. At night, when the world goes quiet, some of those selves rise to the surface. They speak in dreams, or in that odd moment between waking and sleep, where you don't remember who you're supposed to be yet. And if you listen carefully, you can feel them shifting behind your thoughts, voices warming up behind the curtain. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about allowing the version of you that fits this moment to step forward, without fear, without apology. There's a kindness in knowing you are not trapped in one story, that your mind, like the stars, contains infinite orbits. And just because you haven't become someone yet, doesn't mean that self isn't real. It simply waits for its line to be spoken. So tonight, you don't need to force anything. Let the multiverse within you breathe. Let your past selves rest. Let your future selves rehearse quietly in the wings. And let the one who's most at peace with this moment speak softly through your breath. As the light dims in your thoughts, lean into that softness. Let the noise fall away. The next voice we'll hear is the voice behind the voice, and it already knows you well. Trusting the inner compass. Sometimes you just know. Not because someone told you, not because the facts lined up, but because deep inside, something quiet said, "This is right." It doesn't shout. It doesn't explain itself. But still, it moves you. This feeling is what we often call intuition. That word has a kind of mystical ring to it, as if it's some otherworldly gift reserved for prophets or poets. But science tells us otherwise. Intuition isn't a ghostly voice from nowhere. It's your brain, moving faster than your awareness can catch up. It's pattern recognition without narration. Your past experiences, your fears, your desires, all of them woven into a silent calculation that happens in a blink. A scientist might call it unconscious processing. A mystic might call it listening to the soul. But at its core, it's the same compass, guiding without a map, pointing before we can ask the question. This isn't superstition. In fact, some of the greatest discoveries in human history didn't begin with data. They began with a hunch. Why did you choose that path? I don't know. It just felt right. That's a line you'll hear from an artist sketching the first stroke of a masterpiece, from a leader making a high-stakes decision, or from a parent choosing the right words to calm their child. It's not about being irrational. It's about being quietly attuned to something that logic hasn't caught up to yet. But here's the challenge. We live in a world that worships certainty. We want proof. We want explanation. So we silence the whisper inside. We wait for evidence, for permission, for validation, forgetting that sometimes the first signal is not the loudest, but the truest. A gentle conversation between two friends on a quiet evening reveals this beautifully. Why are you moving across the country? I don't have a clear answer, but when I imagine staying, my chest feels tight. When I imagine going, I breathe easier. So you're trusting that feeling? I think that feeling is the truest part of me. Maybe not all truth arrives in sentences. Maybe some of it arrives as stillness, a pull in your gut, a soft number, or a resounding yes that doesn't need to be explained. Maybe it's in that moment when the noise of the world fades and a quieter voice says, "Turn here. Call them now. Let go." The inner compass doesn't always promise comfort, but it offers clarity. And if you listen long enough, you'll start to notice that it speaks in a language older than words, a language of knowing, a language of home. So now the question arises, where does that whisper come from? Is it just memory and neurons? Is it your truest self? Or could it be something beyond you, gently guiding from within? Close your eyes. Listen closely. The answer is already there. Cosmic choices and paths. Some choices feel so small, they barely leave a footprint, like choosing a parking spot or what color mug to use. But deep beneath the quiet shuffle of the everyday, there's a thread, tugged gently, and the entire fabric shifts. You step outside 5 seconds later and bump into someone you hadn't seen in years. You say yes to something trivial, and somehow it becomes the beginning of something immense. This isn't fantasy. It's the mathematics of life. In chaos theory, it's known as sensitivity to initial conditions. The butterfly doesn't cause the storm, but it contributes. A murmur, a note, a tilt, and somewhere else, the sky changes. There's a quiet kitchen light still on at 2 a.m. Someone stares at their phone, debating whether to reach out, whether to say what they've carried for months. One thumb movement, and an entire emotional universe expands or contracts. "Do you think little choices really matter?" someone asks. The other person, half awake, smiles. Maybe the universe is just a long story of small choices that echo forever. In ancient thought, this was karma, not reward or punishment, but ripple, meaning, vibration. One gesture of kindness or cruelty sent into the world, returning in forms we may never recognize. You pause at a green light, just a moment longer, and across the city, someone gets a job because they arrived on time, and the person they replace begins writing a book. That book changes a reader's life, and that reader teaches a child something different. It sounds grand, maybe too grand, but that's the strange beauty of scale. Your actions aren't small just because they look small. A hinge isn't large, but the door it swings can be 1,000 pounds. And maybe that's what you are. A hinge. A pivot point between the past you didn't choose and the future you still can. The stars aren't waiting for grand events. They shift with the quietest gravity. So does your life. And in that gravity, there's grace. "You ever think," someone mutters under their breath, almost embarrassed, "that maybe the universe notices the little things?" The response comes like a whisper through the dark. Only the little things. So breathe tonight. Even this breath changes something. A mood, a pattern, a path. Let the weight of that not crush you, but lift you. Because if the universe responds to even your smallest acts, maybe you are far more powerful than you've been told. Let's stand at that hinge, quietly, with reverence, and then, gently, let the next breath carry us to where the door leads. The spiral path. In the quiet hours of the night, when thoughts swirl like falling leaves in slow motion, you might feel like you're circling the same problems, the same feelings, the same questions. Didn't I already deal with this? You whisper to yourself, eyes tracing the shadows on your ceiling. But what if you're not going in circles at all? What if your path is not a loop, but a spiral? Growth has never been a straight line. Nature doesn't draw with rulers. The galaxies overhead swirl in graceful spirals. The nautilus shell, ancient and sacred, curls inward with mathematical precision. Even our DNA, the very code of life, twists like a soft double helix, spiraling not to trap, but to expand. The spiral is nature's signature, written into the structure of life itself. Have you ever felt like you were back where you started? A woman asks, curling her legs up on the couch, staring out the window. Yeah, he replies from the kitchen, drying a mug. Same fight with myself. Different version of me, though. Exactly, she says, eyes flicking to the steam rising from her tea. It's like I'm reliving the same lesson, but this time I understand it more. Maybe that's what healing is. Not getting over it, but going through it again. Just not the same way. That's the spiral path. Spiritually, the spiral represents evolution. It's not about endless repetition. It's about deepening. You revisit old wounds, but with a wiser heart. You return to old doubts, but with clearer eyes. Each turn of the spiral brings you back to the familiar, yet something has changed. You have changed. It's tempting to think you're stuck, that your progress is invisible because the scenery looks the same. But imagine climbing a spiral staircase inside a tower. Each lap brings you back to the same direction, the same view, but at a higher floor. From this height, things look different, wider, more complete. Maybe the pain that once felt unbearable now feels like a scar with a story. Maybe the love you once lost now feels like a compass, not a chain. In this view, regression is illusion. Repetition is reflection. What you face again, you face with more of yourself. Even emotionally, we spiral. Grief doesn't vanish. It cycles through seasons. Joy, too, is not static. It blooms again in unexpected ways. Relationships return to familiar tensions, not because they're broken, but because they're alive, constantly asking you to see deeper, love fuller, forgive wiser. The spiral path asks for patience. It is slow magic. It doesn't demand arrival. It invites return, each time with more grace. So tonight, if you feel like you're back where you started, pause. Feel the quiet tug of the spiral beneath your feet. Listen closely, not to what's the same, but to what's subtly shifted. The tone of your breath, the softness in your heart, the distance between pain and panic. Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're orbiting truth. And maybe, just maybe, every return is sacred. As the spiral turns inward, deeper and deeper into the quiet folds of the mind, we prepare ourselves to descend not into darkness, but into depth, where the next idea awaits, softly curled like a seed inside your soul. The ego that watches itself. There's a quiet moment, somewhere between brushing your teeth and turning off the light, when you catch yourself, not your reflection, not your face, but the way your mind tenses, the way your breath shortens after a thought you didn't even choose. And in that flicker, something curious happens. You notice that you're noticing. I saw myself snap at him. I watched myself spiral again. I knew I was overreacting while I was doing it. But wait, who is the I in that sentence? The one speaking or the one being spoken about? In psychology, they call this metacognition, the ability to think about our thinking. In ancient texts, the seers called it witness consciousness, the I behind all seeing. One brain, but two voices, one actor, one observer, a duet, playing within the same skull. A man once said to his friend on a rainy train ride, "I knew I shouldn't have said that, but I watched myself say it anyway." His friend, tapping the window, replied, "So who was really in charge, the mouth or the one who watched it move?" It's a strange kind of intimacy, to be both the dancer and the audience, to feel embarrassment rise and yet know it's not the whole of you, to flinch at your own memory, then smile gently, like watching an old film. What if the ego is not a captain at the wheel, but more like a shadow cast by the lighthouse, turning, never still, while something older, quieter, simply watches the sea? Some call that quiet thing the soul, others call it presence, but words only point. What's real is that you've seen yourself, seeing, and maybe, just maybe, that's what you are. A mother once whispered to her daughter, after a long day of spilled milk and bedtime tears, "I saw you trying, even when you didn't get it right." And the girl asked, "How did you know?" And the mother said, "Because I've seen myself do the same." To witness ourselves is the beginning of forgiveness. To know we are not only our impulses, but also the hands that hold them. Not just the storm, but the sky it passes through. So tonight, as your thoughts begin to quiet, let that silent witness take its place. It doesn't judge, it doesn't push, it simply sees. And as you drift gently into the folds of sleep, know that beyond the mirror, something deeper still is watching with you. Let's step toward it now. The observer effect. In the quiet corridors of consciousness, where thought is softer than a whisper and time no longer ticks but breathes, a strange question waits behind the veil. Does the world exist if no one is looking? Quantum mechanics, often regarded as science's strangest gift, offers a radical answer, maybe not in the way we think. The observer effect suggests that the mere act of watching can alter reality itself. Particles behave like clouds of probability, mere suggestions, until something or someone pays attention. Then they collapse. The moment crystallizes. Existence chooses a shape. Two people sit beneath a flickering lamp at night, their tea cooling in silence. "You know," she says softly, "when I close my eyes, I wonder if the room still looks the same." He smiles gently. "Maybe the room's waiting for your gaze, to decide who it wants to be." In that quiet exchange lies the ripple of something deeper. Attention, it seems, isn't passive. It participates. Like a painter's brush on a blank canvas, your awareness shapes the scene. This isn't just physics, it's philosophy in motion. If looking turns a possibility into a fact, then what you choose to look at becomes sacred. Your gaze isn't just noticing, it's birthing. That means a flower grows differently under loving eyes. A moment becomes memory when you bless it with focus. A person feels more real when truly seen. So, what about the shadows? What remains unobserved in the far corners of your own psyche? In the rooms you've closed off, memories you've ignored, wounds you haven't dared to glance at. If observation brings the world into being, then what about the parts of ourselves we never look at? Are they suspended, waiting, half-formed? A voice in the distance asks, half dreaming, "If I look at the things I fear, will they disappear or become real?" Another answers, "Maybe both. Maybe fear fades in light, or maybe you finally see its true face." And here lies the paradox. The more deeply you observe yourself, the less solid you become. The image begins to blur, boundaries dissolve. Are you the observer or the observed? The act of watching folds back on itself, like mirrors facing mirrors, awareness peering into awareness. And the more you look inward, the more you realize there is no fixed self watching, just the watching itself. So, what does this mean as your eyes grow heavy and the night thickens around you? It means your mind is not just a receiver of the world, but a co-creator of it. Each breath you bring awareness to becomes more vivid. Each emotion you notice softens. Each thought, when lovingly observed, begins to settle like dust in sunlight. You don't need to change the world. You just need to witness it gently, because in that sacred gaze, something shifts. Now, as the next moment approaches, don't look out. Look in, not to find an answer, not to name or fix or prove, but to vanish, to let the observer dissolve into the observation. Let go of the watcher, let go of the watched, and drift into the space between, where silence creates, and the wave waits. The illusion of agency. The thought arrives like a leaf in still water. Did I choose this thought, or did it choose me? There's a kind of quiet absurdity in how we walk through life convinced we're steering. But what if the hands on the wheel are just props, and the real driver, silent, unseen, has always been beneath the surface? Science whispers a strange truth. Long before you decide to lift your finger, your brain has already begun the motion. Not a second before, not a breath before, a blink before awareness even registers, a cascade of neurons lights up. By the time you say, "I chose," the body has already obeyed. It's not betrayal, it's orchestration. In a sleepy hallway, someone once said, "Funny thing, I only notice my breathing when I try to control it, but it never really stopped, did it?" And the other, leaning on a vending machine, replied, "Maybe choice is just how we cope with remembering we're not in charge." That isn't defeat, that's invitation. You see, maybe the you narrating your life isn't the general giving orders, but the poet writing after the battle. Maybe free will isn't about control, but attention, not moving the stream, but feeling it as it moves. And with that, another idea unfolds. If we don't choose thoughts but witness them, are we still to blame for the ones that sting, or the ones that bring tears? What if the ego's grip tightens out of fear, not power? Because to release the illusion of control is to walk naked into wind, vulnerable, real, and perhaps freer than ever. Somewhere, not far from here, two strangers waited in line. One asked, "Do you think we choose who we love?" The other smiled faintly. "Feels more like falling, like the ground rushes up to meet you." So if your mind wanders now, if a memory flashes or a tear gently stings the corner of your eye, know this, that's not distraction. That's part of the unfolding. Let it happen. Let the thoughts rise without needing to own them. Let the movements stir without rushing to direct. Let the reins fall from your fingers like dusk slipping into night. Because what moves without you might finally reveal you. Not the commander, not the narrator, but the witness. Sleep if you must, or simply close your eyes and listen to what you're not trying to hear. The real journey happens even when you rest, especially when you rest. And now, we drift onward. When the mind becomes still, what remains? It's a question not just for monks or mystics, but for anyone who has sat alone at night and listened to the quiet hum beneath their thoughts. In that hush, where the world stops demanding and the inner chatter begins to fade, something subtle stirs, not a voice, not an image, but a presence, a gentle awareness watching everything unfold. Meditation isn't about shutting your brain off, she says, leaning back in her chair with a cup of tea. Then what is it? He asks, half curious, half skeptical. It's more like letting it speak without grabbing the mic. In Dzogchen, the ancient Tibetan tradition, meditation is described not as effort, but as recognition. You don't force the sky to clear, you just notice the clouds drift on their own. Zen teaches the same, often with fewer words. You sit, you breathe, and slowly, the illusion of needing to do something dissolves. Even neuroscience has caught on. Studies show that when we sit in mindful stillness, the brain's default mode network, responsible for self-referential thoughts, begins to quiet. We stop rehearsing the past or predicting the future. We just are. But don't mistake stillness for emptiness. It's not a blank void, but a spaciousness. Imagine standing in the eye of a hurricane. Around you, chaos spins. Memories, worries, flashes of what you said or should have said. But in the center, silence. Not passive silence, but alive, listening, watching. And in that space, something sacred is revealed. The observer. The part of you that isn't the thought, the feeling, or the fear, but the witness of it all. Thoughts rise like bubbles in a pond, some shimmer, some sting. But none are you. You are the pond, or maybe the sky that reflects it. I always thought peace meant no thoughts, he murmurs. But it's more like letting them come and go without chasing them, she replies, softly. It's the space around the noise that brings calm, not the silence itself. We spend so much of our lives trying to fix, change, or escape what we feel. But what if peace isn't found by doing more, but by noticing more? What if the storm doesn't need to be conquered, just observed? Tonight, don't fight the thoughts that visit you. Watch them. Let them dance across the surface. And beneath it all, feel the stillness, like a deep ocean holding it all. Sit in that stillness. Let it hold you. Let it reveal the truth that's been waiting patiently beneath the noise. The ethical illusion. A pause lingers in the space between thoughts. What if everything you ever chose wasn't really a choice? There's a man who stands at the corner of a busy cafe, hands trembling slightly as he counts coins for a sandwich. The cashier is patient. Behind him, someone mutters under their breath, "Why doesn't he just get a job?" But what if the answer isn't that simple? You see, morality has long been our anchor. Right and wrong, good and bad. We build nations on these lines. We punish, reward, label, exile. But now comes the whisper. What if the self that decides is just smoke dressed as substance? If every decision you've made was shaped by things beyond your control, genes you never picked, childhoods you never scripted, chemicals swirling through brains shaped by generations, then who exactly is guilty? There's a young woman on the train, gripping her phone, heart pounding. Her father taught her silence was survival. So when her coworker speaks harshly, she smiles instead of pushing back. Is that politeness or programming? A boy steals bread. A man lies to feel safe. A parent yells because their nervous system is fried from years of hidden fear, and we call them wrong, but maybe they're wired, not wicked. This doesn't mean that harm is harmless. The hurt is real. The wound still bleeds. But when we peel back the veil and see the inner clockwork, the gears turning beneath the mask, something softens. Justice doesn't vanish. It evolves. What if instead of sharpening swords of judgment, we built bridges of insight? What if, instead of asking, "Who's to blame?" we ask, "How did this begin?" Two strangers sit in a dim hallway outside a courtroom. One is shaking. The other offers a water bottle, no words. In that silence, a thought floats between them. Maybe being human isn't about always choosing right. Maybe it's about being understood before being condemned. In many traditions, guilt implies soul, but in many minds, the soul is shaped by circumstance. What then is forgiveness, if not the realization that the line between me and them is paper thin? A light turns green. No one moves. Everyone waits for the first person to cross. Morality sometimes works like that, hesitant, communal, contagious. So tonight, we loosen our grip on old definitions. We sit in the quiet truth that maybe no one is fully to blame, and maybe that's not weakness, but the beginning of mercy. Drift with that thought. Let it rest in your chest like soft breath. What if we didn't need to punish to protect? What if we've been trying to fix a mirror by hammering its cracks? Perhaps real justice is learning to see the reflection without breaking it. And now we turn gently toward the next horizon, asking softly, what happens to the soul when choice disappears? Sleep comes slowly. You can return to this thought tomorrow. For now, rest in the rhythm. The blame illusion. A quiet question stirs in the stillness of night. What if no one is truly to blame? In the soft space between thought and sleep, the mind lingers on courtroom echoes. Guilt, judgment, punishment. But something more curious has entered the scene. Scientists point to brain scans, to tumors pressing against decision-making centers, to trauma etched like scars into neural pathways. The child who grew up in violence, the adult who lashes out, are they villains or simply messengers of inherited pain? In recent years, defense attorneys have presented more than just alibis. They present biology. A man commits a crime, and a scan reveals a shadow in the prefrontal cortex. A woman's rage, we learn, is the residue of years spent surviving the impossible. The line between choice and compulsion begins to blur. The gavel still falls, but it falls on something softer, less certain. One evening, two friends sat by a window, sipping tea while the world outside drizzled with rain. "Do you think people deserve punishment?" one asked quietly. The other thought for a moment, eyes tracing a drop as it slid down the glass. "Maybe not punishment," she said. "Maybe understanding. Not to excuse, but to prevent. Even the worst crimes, especially those. That's where the roots are deepest. What we once called evil now looks more like suffering misdirected. It doesn't mean we accept harm. It means we respond to it with tools that work. Not just bars and bars and bars, but healing, rewiring, reframing. Justice as treatment, not vengeance. Precision, not softness. Accountability, not annihilation. This isn't forgiveness that forgets. It's understanding that transforms. The future of justice may not shout. It may whisper through therapy, through neuroscience, through early intervention. Imagine a society that asks why, not to excuse, but to unravel, to find the tangled thread and pull gently until the knot of violence loosens. What if blame was just a story we told, when we didn't yet know how the brain folds, how pain hides in synapses, how the past echoes into fists? In this dreamlike descent into thought, we meet not monsters, but humans. Flawed, wounded, sometimes dangerous, but rarely evil in the way old myths insist. The courtroom of the future may not look like a war. It may look like a clinic, a classroom, a long, patient breath. And as you drift deeper into rest, you might wonder, If I had lived their life, thought their thoughts, carried their wounds, would I have done differently? Now, the journey curves. We leave behind what we do and descend toward something older, more mysterious, not action, but essence. What are we? Beneath blame, beneath story, beneath even thought. Close your eyes. Something ancient is waiting. The soul's choice. When the lights go dim and the world quiets just enough to hear yourself breathing, there's a question that echoes softly beneath the noise of every day. If you are not your choices, then what are you? A whisper behind your ribs, a feeling before a thought, the part of you that watches even when your mind races ahead. Some say the soul is the author behind the curtain, scribbling stories before you're born, selecting lessons, wounds, and miracles like beads on a necklace. Others say there is no author, no soul at all, just cells and stories, patterns firing in a brain that calls itself me. But what if both are true, or neither? A man once leaned across a cafe table and said, "You know, I think I've been here before." His friend raised an eyebrow, expecting a punchline. "Not the cafe," the man added. "This moment, the regret, the decision I haven't made yet. I think I chose this long ago." That friend didn't laugh. He just sat still and listened, because sometimes the weight of a sentence is enough to change the room's gravity. There are belief systems, ancient ones, that suggest the soul selects a life before entering it, much like a diver choosing which sea to plunge into. They say suffering is not a punishment, but a syllabus. That heartbreak doesn't break you. It chisels you into someone who can hold more light. But what if there is no script, no blueprint? What if you are not the result of pre-written karma, but the echo of billions of moments bumping into each other, forming patterns we later call fate? The mystery isn't meant to be solved tonight, because whether chosen before birth or forged in real time, your tears still water something. Even if you don't see what grows yet, even if all you've ever done was survive, you are not a destination. You're a passage, a breath between two unknowns, not a fixed identity, but a path unfolding with each yes, each no, each unexpected silence. A woman once offered her seat on the train to someone carrying too much, not because she had to, not because she'd chosen kindness that morning, but because, in that moment, something wordless inside her said, "Now." Maybe that's the soul, not a grand architect, but a soft thread tugging when no one else sees it move. And maybe every time you say yes to love, even when it hurts, some part of you remembers. So if you don't know who you are, maybe that's okay. Maybe the soul isn't a thing you are, but the trail you leave when you keep walking through pain with your eyes still open. Rest now. Let the question echo, unanswered. Let the seed fall into the quiet. You don't need to name it. In this stillness, something will grow. Not because you chose it, but because you stayed. Let's rest in that seed and water it with silence. A new definition of freedom. Some say freedom is the wind in your hair, the open road, no rules, no strings. But maybe that's just the myth of freedom, an idea we've inherited like a broken compass that spins wildly but never points home. What if freedom isn't escape at all, but presence? There's a silence that comes when you stop struggling against your own life. Philosopher Harry Frankfurt once offered a definition so subtle it slips past the noise. Real freedom is not doing whatever you want, it's wanting what you do. That sounds simple, but it requires a rare alignment. Imagine your thoughts, your actions, and your identity standing in a quiet triangle, unmoved by wind or doubt. That is not chaos. That is peace. We often think we're free when we can choose between paths, but how often do we choose one and secretly long for another? How often do we say yes while meaning maybe, or walk forward while looking back? This isn't freedom. It's fragmentation, a tug of war inside your chest. I could be in Paris right now, someone says, scrolling through photos of strangers in warm cafes. Then why aren't you? The other replies gently. The first one shrugs. Because I'm supposed to be here. And the silence between them says it all. Maybe you're free not when you have no chains, but when you forget you were ever bound. Real freedom feels like stillness, not speed, not the ability to jump to any branch, but the contentment of sitting on one and singing. The bird may have wings, but that doesn't mean it's always flying. There's a beauty in choosing, not running, in saying, here I am, and meaning it. And so, the deeper question isn't what can you do, but do you want to do it? Not where can you go, but can you be here, fully, completely, without flinching? When your inner world no longer argues with the outer, when you don't wish for another name, another story, another day, that is freedom. Not a place you arrive at, but a state that quietly arrives in you. And maybe, just maybe, that's what rises from the ashes of all the false versions of autonomy we were promised. Not the power to move away, but the courage to stand still. The next step? It's not a leap outward. It's a soft falling inward, into yourself. Time's quiet loop. A train passes at the exact same moment each morning. Not because time repeats, but because you notice it now, where before you didn't. Something about rhythm always returns, but with softer footsteps the second time around. They were sitting in the laundromat. That quiet kind of silence where dryers hum like lullabies. One turned to the other and said, "Didn't we talk about this before?" The other smiled faintly, folding a warm shirt. Maybe we're not repeating. Maybe we're spiraling. There's something ancient about this idea, older than memory and still unfolding. The Mayans traced time in sacred wheels. The cosmos itself spins in arms of starlight. Even your habits loop, sleep, wake, reach, regret, try again. But no loop is perfect. No return is truly the same. And therein lies the grace of it. You're not failing when a lesson visits you twice. You're orbiting it, getting closer. You might walk away from someone, only to meet another with the same voice, same story, same need tugging at your heart. It isn't punishment, it's refinement. Even DNA coils and spirals. Even grief comes back dressed as something else. Fatigue, laughter, distraction. But every reappearance, every uncanny déjà vu might be an invitation. Not to escape, but to soften. To see what you missed last time, or what you weren't ready to hold. Someone once whispered that forgiveness is not a one-time act, but a spiral staircase. You climb, step by step, facing the same wall, but from higher ground. And maybe healing is like that too. Loops that feel like return, but are actually motion. Inward, upward, deeper. Sometimes time doesn't move forward, it folds. You return to a feeling from childhood, not to stay there, but to retrieve something forgotten. An old song plays, and you are 8 again, but also 20, also now. And somehow, more whole than you were before the music. There was a woman in the bookstore, fingers running along worn spines like old friends. She paused, tilted her head. Funny. I think I bought this book last year. I just didn't read it then. And and she smiled like it made perfect sense. Because it did. Timing isn't always about the clock. Sometimes it's about readiness. So if your mind wanders to a familiar sorrow tonight, or to a choice you swore you'd never make again, do not flinch. You are not falling backward. You are arriving from a new direction. Because spirals, though they loop, always move, and every circle brings you closer to center. Not the center of time, but the center of you. So rest easy now. There's no race, just the gentle spiral of becoming. The arc bends inward, the coil tightens, and ahead we meet the unspeakable, quietly, together. The silent answer. There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when the questions stop, not because they were answered, but because they are no longer needed. The frantic search for meaning winds down into something quieter, softer, like a tide receding after years of crashing waves, and in that stillness something stirs, not an answer, not a revelation, but a presence. What if peace isn't found in resolution, but in surrender? When free will fades, when all the paradoxes that once kept us up at night dissolve into the soft folds of sleep, what remains isn't emptiness. It's rhythm, a heartbeat that continues without our permission, a breath that doesn't ask for understanding to keep going. Love, too, sits there, wordless, untamed, unprovable. I used to think the silence was lonely, one voice says in the dark, lying in bed with their eyes wide open. Yeah, the other murmurs, but lately, it feels like someone else is in it with me. Perhaps this is the secret most of us stumble into only when we're too tired to try. That life doesn't always demand understanding. It often just wants our attention. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't reach, doesn't analyze, doesn't grasp, but listens. Like a child listening to the hum of the world. Sometimes, the mind doesn't need fixing. It needs rest, and rest doesn't always come from shutting off. It comes from tuning in. Not to the chaos, not to the chatter, but to the space between thoughts, to the awareness that watches without judgment, to the still observer who was always there beneath the layers of identity and intention. The illusion of choice, so often framed as a trap, might be something gentler, a companion, walking beside us through the labyrinth, not guiding, not pushing, but keeping us company in the quiet. It doesn't need to be defeated. Maybe it only needs to be acknowledged. So if you're drifting now, half asleep, half awake, know this. You don't have to figure it all out. You don't even have to try. Let the questions dissolve. Let the effort fall away. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply here. And that is enough. And now, dear traveler, if your eyes remain open, we will begin again. You've wandered through 100 rooms of your own awareness, some familiar, others strangely shaped by shadows you forgot you cast. But now, at the final level, there's no test, just presence, just breathe. Maybe the mind isn't a ladder to climb, but a mirror to dissolve into. Maybe sleep is the soft collapse of questions. So if there's still a part of you waiting for the answer, let it wait. The stars outside aren't asking for meaning. They're just shining without permission. You don't need to understand the journey to rest within it. Close your eyes. Let everything go quiet. And let the last thought be this. What if you were never dreaming, but being dreamt? Good night, traveler. We'll meet again, between the next breath and the next illusion.